all of the Bosch motors from the current 5th generation share one very important thing in common. They use the exact same frame interface on the electric bicycle. This standardization means that all of these motors are installed and also removed in precisely the same way. This procedure is done using only 2 main mounting points, which are made up of 2 longer bolts and 2 corresponding opposing nuts. For removing the motor, I strongly recommend that you first remove the e-bike battery from the frame, if at all possible. This is a crucial safety measure that ensures the system cannot be accidentally switched on and is therefore completely and safely powered down. Additionally, a slightly lighter bike is much easier to handle, for example when lifting it onto a repair stand. In the next step, to remove the motor from the frame, you will first need to take off all motor covers that may be installed on your electric bike. In our specific case, the motor cover was mounted with 4 screws. In order to reach the rear screws, we also found it necessary to remove the rear wheel. Removing the crank and chainring does make the entire job a bit easier, though it is important to note that this is not an absolutely necessary step. You can now go ahead and take the chain off the front chainring. After that is done, proceed to disconnect all of the electrical plug connections that you will find located on the motor. At this point, the motor is only connected to the bike's frame by 2 remaining bolts. You can now unscrew these bolts. In order to do so, you will need to use a Torx 40 screwdriver. Simply position your tool on the non-drive side of the bicycle and turn it counterclockwise in order to loosen it. Then, for the drive side, where the chainring is located, you can use your finger to hold the frame nut on the inside. This is an important step, so that the nut doesn't turn along with the bolt, even though it is seamlessly integrated into the frame. Especially when the bolt gets looser, it might start turning along with it, so just hold it in place there. For this procedure, I recommend that you start with the front bolt. You should do this because once you've loosened it, removed the nut and pulled the bolt all the way out, it allows you to conveniently swing the entire motor down. Following a similar procedure, you can then move on to unscrew the rear bolt, and once that bolt is removed, you can take the motor completely out of the frame. Now that the motor is removed, you can clean everything thoroughly there, because dirt and other grime can definitely get in here during trail riding or everyday use. Or you can of course also carry out important maintenance work like routing cables or installing new accessories. While you're already at it, I also highly recommend that you inspect the installed frame sleeves directly. It's important to do this from time to time because these are the specific interfaces where the bolts and the frame are actually connected and secured to each other. If your e-bike has already covered several thousand kilometers, you can simply replace them. We've summarized how to do this for you in a separate video. To reinstall the Generation 5 Bosch motor, you can simply proceed in the reverse order of its removal. First, carefully position the motor at the rear mounting point again and then push the bolt through. For this step, remember to use the shorter bolt and you can secure it on the other side with the corresponding frame nut. It is very important to make sure this nut is properly inserted into the frame as it is designed not to turn when being screwed in. Tighten it up reasonably at first so that the motor can't slip any further and is completely and securely mounted in the frame. Now, route all of the cables that may come from the display or the battery just as they were originally laid out before, and it's important to make sure that when you lever the motor in, no cables get pinched between the motor and the surrounding frame, and that all of the cables run loosely to their respective connectors. In our example, for instance, we initially routed the battery cable in quite the wrong way. It actually didn't need to be routed over the motor at all, but instead should have been laid underneath the motor through the cover. Now screw in the second motor bolt as well, passing it through the motor and fastening it on the other side with the frame nut. Next, properly tighten both nuts, or rather both bolts, with a tightening torque of 30 Newton meters. It is also very important to note that Bosch does not recommend using assembly grease for this installation. Therefore, you should simply clean the corresponding nuts and put them back into place. If you have tightened everything properly and everything is clean, you can also reconnect the plug connections. Connect the display cable to the display cable port, the battery cable to the battery cable port, and then reinstall the motor cover. Depending on what you had to remove, reinstall the rear wheel, and just like that, you've successfully removed and reinstalled the motor. All the spare parts you need for removal and installation, as well as the right tools, can of course be found in our shop. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them in the comments, and we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a like and subscribe.